Hello, everybody. Welcome to what it was going to be a weekly thing, if not eventually bi-weekly thing, where I go over all the craziness and all the new updates and answer any questions and hopefully uh, get you to a point where you can start taking advantage of some of the cool stuff that is coming out in Subtext. So let me just show you some new things here. And feel free if you have any questions as we go through. You can leave it in the chat, or if people start, wow, George is here. Hello, George. Um, feel free to leave uh your comments in the chat, and I should be able to answer most of them. But there are a couple things I wanted to go over. One was probably like how most people would want to use Muse and Subtext, which is to I have this outline, or I have a certain amount of work that I've already done, and I'd like to figure out the story form, or where do I go to from there. The other thing would be when you get to that place in Subtext where you have to start weaving everything together, and you might feel like it's time to give up and all the new things that are there. And then also, I wanted to show the really fun thing too last night with every month for like the last 30 years, we go over different genres of film and television series. Last night we did this episode from, oops, no, that's not what I did. From The Penguin, which was the fourth episode where Sophia ends up being sent to Arkham. And what was really fun about this one was prior to the class. So what it is there's a handful uh, Dramatica experts, people who know everything that Dramatica theory and kind of all the theoretical concepts that a lot of subtext is built on and developed from, and trying to figure out what the unique story form of the story is, which will fit into the conversation about what do you do when you already have some work and you want to kind of figure out what that is. So in this, with a work that's already completed, which you can consider to be like the final draft of it, how what are the thematic um, relationships within that create that story form that make it such a great story? Because not only is the entire first season phenomenally put together, so I even have the story form for the whole first season, so for all 8 episodes if you're looking at everything at once. But then also the one that we just did last night is kind of its standalone story where you could kind of extract out her whole part where she ends up in the insane asylum, and it would work on its own as a complete story. So anytime you have a complete story, you could do that. So what was really fun is we took like 2 hours to go through and eventually landed on this story form that you'll see in Subtext, right? Everything's in here and it kind of goes over everything that's put there. Well, what I did last night, go back to here, was right prior to it starting, I just went ahead and dropped the entire plot synopsis into Muse and said, oh, what's the story form? Just to see if it would be able to go through and figure out all the different bits and pieces just from what was in, kind of like a general understanding of the plot of the episode. And it was really crazy. So if I do this one, it's right here. So if we go up to the top, so yeah, I just dragged and dropped the, you know, what's the latest version of everybody's understanding of the plot synopsis into Muse. And where is it? Okay, I think that's it. Yeah. And I just asked it to figure out the story form. Now, you can't currently, which I went over last week, you cannot upload if you're in focus mode. And for those who don't know, the difference between the two, flow is when you just want to be super creative and just keep going with it, and it's a much better writer. It's more entertaining, and you can upload files. For whatever reason, I don't have access to be able to upload to the super smart version yet. So the workaround to that is just copy paste like a big chunk of text into there until eventually that is freed up, which I assume will be within the next couple weeks. But definitely use the focus mode because you'll get something like this. So it went through and just read this like first, just that brief little synopsis there. So it's like a one-page synopsis, and then went through and identified the objective story through line of it. And I hope it's okay, just so you know, because it's story form, it's going to be completely spoiled for you, the story. So if you haven't seen it and it's fantastic and you're somebody that likes to be surprised, I will record this and you can watch it later. But the story form is the entire story. It's all the spoilers involved in it. So it's gonna break it all down. So not only did it identify the four through lines um, perfectly, like literally, like it identified her, you know, trying to figure out what's going on with her family, and then that ends up putting her in. I should probably, if you haven't seen it, Sophia is Carmine Falcone's daughter. And the story is she, her dad is a big crime boss. Um, and then because she starts to question some of the things that he's done or what might be involved in, they declare her crazy and send her to an insane asylum. And then in the insane asylum, she turns into a supervillain. It's kind of like the story of her origin story. So just dropping that in, it was able to identify what the objective story was, her personal issues that she's dealing with that have relationships to the plot, but not necessarily are the plot itself. Identified the Carmine family, kind of like the Falcone family, as the obstacle character. So the ones who have a certain point of view that it's challenging her to grow, because she's kind of nice in the beginning, and then she runs little community get-togethers, and by the end, she's not very nice. And then the relationship here, which is um, kind of like people you thought you could trust, people who betrayed you, in the start of a relationship she builds with one of the doctors that's in the office or the hospital. So not only did it do that, but as it was going through here, it actually found the domains of where all the conflict is coming from. So in just this one shot, it actually identified all of them like to a T, which was 100% correct, as being the best arrangement of, okay, if I'm looking at the entire story and I'm trying to find the source of conflict, these are the domains that I believe that they would be in. And then proceeded, the story driver is a dynamic. So it's basically picking out all the different pieces that will form this story form. It got these two pretty bad, but then the rest are pretty accurate. And then this one is like spot on. So the way that I found the quickest way to really get to the heart of what it is that you're trying to say with your work is to really pay attention to whatever that pivotal element is in your story. So that would be, these are identified in a story form as the pivotal elements, and they almost are always carried out by the main character and the obstacle character as two sides of the same coin, which they are. So on one side, the main character has one point of view, and on the other side, the obstacle character is, and then that's the dynamic between those two is what's fueling the whole story. So if you've seen it or not, there is a thematic argument going on between what it takes for a woman to survive in a man's world and how she elevates herself into that world. And it's this argument between whether it's more appropriate to always seek balance and always look for fairness and what's right, or to be part of a more inequitable group that kind of just does whatever the heck they want, regardless of who they hurt. So it's kind of the dynamic. Those are really connected together. So, oh, if you have your mic on, just mute so I can focus here. Second. Hopefully everybody's muted there. Okay. Um, so I thought that was insane that it did that. And then it said maintained. All right. So in subtext, when it comes to the resolve between those two points of view, one side is going to give up their way of doing things, and the other one's going to maintain it. And that's helps what the author's trying to get across in the story. It's like the argument that they're making. The authors of this particular episode are saying, all right, well, you're not gonna you're not gonna win anything trying to be peaceful. You have to move into this spot, and then you'll be able to get what it is that you want. So the fact that it was able to do all of this was crazy. I didn't expect that right off the bat. Um, but you'll notice there were some things that I said probably aren't true. And that is whenever you upload a work into it, because it's incomplete, there might be some things that don't either gel with what it is that you want in your story or that you understand to know to be true. So it's doing its best job of finding out how everything fits together and give you a complete story form. But then you can respond and change it the way that you want. So I was said, wow, oh, that was unbelievable. And I would agree with you on everything except maybe the resolve, because it's really clear she's a really nice, good girl in the beginning and she's a criminal at the end. So just completely giving up all that to do it the other way. Um, and then that's just a matter of the training that will go on with Muse, just to know um to know the difference between what it means to like give up like the old way that you're doing things and then to take it into the new. And then this is it's doing the alignment thing because the models are trained to be moralizing, right? Um, spoiler, she kills everybody in her family. So the failure bad part of it is the model kind of projecting its own alignment onto the story form. And I will work on that to get that to break free of it. But the idea that it's actually portrayed as really triumphant for her. Like it was a good thing that she did that, and now she knows who she is, and then she's the villain for the whole rest of the series. I wasn't sure about that, so I said I almost feel like it's a success bad story, so I would keep her pivotal as equity, which is right. And come to think of it, I would differ on the judgment because it is good. She is resolved at the end. So I could even like contradict myself within a one paragraph here. And then it rewrote it, went back through and made all those changes. And then I ended up saying, well, that's phenomenal. Like it went through, made all these changes, and then this was actually the same exact story form that we ended up with after 2 hours. This was just done in like 5 minutes to put this together in here. So then once you have a story form and you feel really strongly about that, I just said, go ahead and finalize this and save it under the Penguin. And this is hit and miss with Focus being able to do it, but it worked. It saved it away to Muse. And then I was able to just hit down here the context button uh, for the story form to be able to jump right into here and then see the whole story form laid out. Does anybody have any questions about that? You see why I have to do this weekly, because there'll be a lot of information. So it'll be a lot of information, and then you can always come back and go over it again. But now that the context is set into this story form, then I can start asking questions about it. So what was interesting to me was when we got to the story form, I wondered, what is it? Go back to that part. Oh, it said I've gone ahead and created the new story for you called The Penguin Episode 4. The current conversation has been attached, so you can pick up right where you left off. Happy writing. And I said, oh, I wish I had written it, but I didn't because somebody else wrote it. But the name of the episode was Sentiani, and I had no real idea what that meant. So it told me, well, it's an Italian phrase that translates to 100 years or more. Sentimentally, may you live 100 years. And it's often used as a toast or blessing, wishing someone a long and prosperous life. Given the mob and family dynamics in your story, it could easily be a phrase tied to tradition. So that really connected with me because then if you look, just because of the stuff that we had talked about before, and then it put together this whole story form, it predicted that, okay, well, if you have these as the core argument in your story, then the main issue coming from that obstacle character point of view is going to be destiny, which is just another way of saying, may you live 100 years. This is your destiny. You're going to be part of this family and all that stuff. So I thought that was super amazing to be able to see that play out, and then also to be able to interact with it. So the whole point of doing all this is to set up a context for which you can understand your story, so that then you can start working against that context and keep that order, but then still have room to be able to break off and do any other sort of ideas that you have. So then when I identified it as that, oh, that would be the destiny issue, and then it would, bring all that up. Both a toast to longevity and a haunting reminder of the chains of legacy, which is 100% the thematic issue underlying the story. But you'll notice I flipped back to flow here. So you can always tell in every response whether or not it was done with subtext flow or then subtext focus. So when you go back, you can look to see, oh, okay, I was really looking at the story structure. And then when I wanted to ask this kind of more or less story structure and more about writing and sort of telling that kind of stuff, I flipped it back to subtext flow to be able to go back and forth on that. Yeah, and then I think which was kind of nice earlier today, because I just use OpenAI to do the APIs on here. The plan is for not GPT 4.5, but for GPT 5, that there's just one model. So then you won't have to switch. I still think I'll leave it in here so people can switch back and forth if you want to, but it'll pick it for you automatically and be able to do all that stuff. But for right now, it's nice to be able to switch back and forth. And then, that's how you would work with your story. So that was the first thing I actually wanted to get across, was that, was just to show how that worked and lead that into your own stories. Does anybody have any questions? Comments? Okay, so then just prior to this class, somebody asked, well, if you have a story idea, right? Or you know what it is that you want to do, or you have like an outline or even like a first draft, how would you use subtext to then be able to help write your story and identify stuff? So I just went into like basic vanilla ChatGPT and asked it to give me a historical drama with pirates and just do a basic outline. So it did Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, gave me some nice motifs, and then asked if I would like any changes to the character arcs. So, let's see how good it is at writing stories. And then, so I actually did the same exact thing that I did for the Penguin episode last night. I just put that in there and said, help me figure out the story form, or, help me identify these things. And it does the same process. So it identified the objective story as, like a pirate sort of thing, betrayal, foreign military assault, the end of an era, and then pick the domain of physical processing. So we'll focus on raids on galleons and commission of new ships and naval battles, all that fun stuff. And then identified the main character as Captain Elias Graves. Once a fearsome pirate wishing to retire, he's forced to return to the fight. All right, that's not bad. And put him in attitudinal framing, which means based on what was written by ChatGPT, he was a beer, and it's his honor that he's having to deal with, which is where that attitudinal framing is. So it actually is very reminiscent of the Penguin episode, because she starts out very much like, oh, I'm so sorry, and then by the end kind of takes action. And then identified the pivotal element as acceptance. Okay, well, maybe that's what it was about. He must come to accept the truth of who he is now. And then moved on to the obstacle character. Now you can see already the plot synopsis written for a single episode of The Penguin already worked much better than this one written by ChatGPT, because the pivotal element it singled out is not the opposite of this single element. the pivotal elements, the two sides of the same coin. The opposite of acceptance is rejection, and the opposite of desire is actually ability. So it'll go through, and because most people, their stories don't work, it'll try and find the best possible way it can to identify what those are and give you back, like reflect back to you, this is what I see. And I'm sure if you're new to all this, you might not understand that, oh, acceptances and desire don't fit together. They don't even, I can't even imagine a world where a story about acceptance fits with desire. They don't even like quadrangulate or even triangulate together, and then identify the relationship story through line. So the domains are put into an appropriate place, like the big picture, but the elements don't actually work. So I know that if you don't know that, when you try and save it, it'll go and make all these checks and it'll say, oh, actually, we got to decide on something. What it'll do is it'll do what this did, which it went through. And what I thought was really crazy interesting is, and I'll just use my camera here, but if the problem that it identified for the obstacle character was up here in this corner, and the problem it identified for the main character is here, it actually found a place over here where they both kind of synced up. So it kind of tried to find the best substitute to try and make the outline at least approach somewhat similarly the same thing, but then still just gave two different versions. So if you wanted to lean, if you feel like the main character part of it is more what that story is about, then the argument would be between expectation and determination. So maybe um, Captain Elias, he's somebody who always feels like he has to live up to people's expectations, whereas this other guy, Jonas Crow, is somebody who just chooses for himself what he wants in life. That would be an argument between these two. Or the other one was this, so it still can't agree 100% on which one is the right one, where are you motivated more by the results, like what you get out of everything, all the treasures and all that stuff, or is it more life's a journey and it's really fun to go and sail on the seven seas? So maybe Jonas is result, and Elias is process, and he likes to go have fun and stuff. I still don't know that, but it's still trying to do its best to make a complete story out of that chat GPT thing. So if anybody was to pick here, should we go with the uh, living up to people's expectations and choosing for yourself, or treasure versus life as a journey? Which one should we pick? Let's go with anybody.
Treasure.
Treasure. Okay, let's go with results versus process. And I think, is Elias going to be the kind of guy who thinks life is the journey, and the other guy is the more results oriented, or is Elias more results oriented, and by the end he learns? You want that one? Okay. I think Elias is all about results, and Jonas is all about process. Do we have enough for a complete story form yet? All right, so then it will drop the expectation and the determination, and then try and come up with a story form that will be the closest approximation to a good story. Because if you read through that chat GPT story, it'd be like, it's like, yeah, I guess it's got a beginning and an end, but it's not really saying much. So let's see what we got. All right, so it's going to go through the objective story and the main character, obstacle character, their relationship. I guess it made a relationship that wasn't between the two of them, which is really nice. And then, oh, so we have these other questions to answer, which are the remaining stuff to figure out, which would be, what are the major plot points? Do we want it to end in happiness or tragedy? I think we want Elias to change. We definitely want Elias to relinquish his old ways, just caring about treasure. Um, this will be an action adventure, so let's do action story driver. I'm gonna say good, good judgment. And that's whether or not Elias feels resolved over all the things that he went through. Is getting to be life as a journey a good thing for him? Um, and I would think more cause and effect for the alignment. And then I'll say I have no idea for narrative field. That sounds like something crazy. So whether or not it's space time or time space is just the landscape of the narrative. What's driving and putting everything into order? Is it all the different places you go and these sort of options that are available to you and all the different this kind of spatial thing, or is everything being pressured by time? So we'll go through all this stuff and it should, there we go. So mark the action, the success, the good, dopamine, and chose. Usually like 95% of the time, you just want to pick this. And do we have a complete? At this point, we have defined all these. Would you like to proceed with finalizing the story form? And yeah, finalize story form with a fun name. Save it. And so all the different options right now, there are about 32,000 different story forms that can be made. Since 21, I've made 6,000 of them because it's about a 10-minute process, and I only do it if it's one that people haven't asked for yet. So this one is pretty familiar. So it went ahead and just grabbed from its knowledge. If you don't know it, right now it'll tell you to go into the story form builder and do it manually, but I'm hoping sometime this week I can get to it where it'll just say, hey, this is a new one. I have to make it. Give me about 10 minutes and I'll send you an email when I'm done. So that should be pretty soon. I won't be doing it, but Muse will be doing it. So then it did all this stuff and saved it. So you'll see down here, and it broke the formatting, but the story is the kind of container for all the work that we've done. And then the story form is this second one here. If you're on a mobile device, that context is down here at the bottom. So you have the story form, and then the conversation that we're in. So you always know what context you're speaking of. So I can just go here into the story form, and then this will have the entire story form already saved in there that I can then start building off and asking questions. I could even do, so now that we have this, this would be fun. I would say, okay, looks great. Can we look at the original synopsis and then go ahead and beat out all 16 transits with what I originally had in mind, but feel free to add in parts of the story I missed or completely left out. Let me know, learn something, and then write them all out in order, act by act. Right? So I'm saying, look at that original synopsis from ChatGPT. And now that I have a really good story structure and story form for what it is I want to use this thematic progression through the narrative to make sure my outline is moving in a way that's, it's going to tell a story that actually feels complete, both logically and, um, emotionally. I will say, because I haven't worked on any of the other story points, like the problem and what that means and all that stuff, it'll be okay. It'll certainly be better than the original outline, but I would definitely want to like really build it out and come up with all the fun, engaging stuff of what that relationship is all about, why Elias is the way that he is, and all that stuff to be able to go through and answer all those questions. And then that will just create a um, more illustrative. That was way fast. I don't think that was. Oh, if it's just going to do 111, that's ridiculous. But yeah. Okay, this will be a good lead into my next thing, actually. So it's going through and looked at the original outline, the ChatGPT one, and then is putting some order to it. So it's announcing, okay, well, the first transit's going to be about learning, and then Elias is going to be dreaming of a peaceful life. From quiet moments at sea, we glimpse flashbacks of his most notorious raids. All right, that's all right. But you'll notice it's just doing objective story, then main character, then obstacle character, then relationship, then it'll do act two, and it'll do the same pattern, which is good. And it's adding in detail in here to kind of bring it closer to this. You're just giving it more form to it. Um, but this is not, it's okay. Added detail. All right, so then it's going through 333 and then 4444. All right, a few notes on what was added. I introduced Denali map for transits. Increased focus on internal shifts. In the main character transits, the internal transformation is made more explicit. So that's not even, I guarantee you, the main character arc. And maybe I'll put this up as like a post so you can see the difference between the two. I guarantee you there's no main character arc from beginning to end. So it put in that main character arc, gave a little bit more about Jonas, and then built out the relationship arc between him and Anne. It's pretty weak because I would want to go in and really like build it out, but at least that's a good start. But the one thing I know for sure is not going to be right is how it was always doing the same order, where it's like obstacle character, or I'm sorry, objective story, main character. It's like doing the same four, and that will lead nicely into. Let's do this. Let's go back to the story form, and here's the develop screen, right? So this is where you have your Muse workspace where we can be free flowing and all, conversational, or you can get into the nitty gritty and just open it up in the develop workspace, which will show once it loads up different plotting that goes on. So if I go into, I'm pretty sure this will be open. So it's done. Load up. No, not gonna have that for me because this hasn't been connected up. Let's do, oops, create the objective story, main character, obstacle character, and relationship. And then when it comes to this, where, oh, so I'll just switch back to flow for a second. Let's say, can you just write up? I just want to give context before I show the weaving part of it. So here's the objective story. Just drop this in there. And then, oh, if we fill out the story points and develop, are those taken as context in any random conversation within the story form? No, that is not a true thing. The in the Muse workspace is not connected yet to the develop workspace. So I would like either exclusively work and develop or work in the Muse workspace, knowing that you would have to grab on it. I haven't saved anything in here yet. So, like for instance, I'll show you. If I go to the objective story through line and I go to, oh, it's this one. Let me go to the story form here. Okay. So if I go to perspectives, Oh, did it save it already? The heck? Oh, okay, great. Oh, that's a good example. All right. So this is the same thing here. Okay. Yeah. So it did save it. But watch if I go back to the perspective and I go to the main character, it should be empty. Okay, cool. So then if I go here, wait, what am I doing again? I put this conversation back. Oh, darn it. No.
There.
Here, and then I go to conversations.
Right.
I go down to the bottom. All right, let me get all these in here first. So let's put the main character one here. Yeah, you have to, the only thing I can say is I the develop workspace is what's been around for the last like 5, 6 years. And obviously once all the AI stuff came out, it's like, oh cool, I'll do this Muse workspace. I just have to align the two of them together so you don't have to do this copy paste thing. But all I'm doing is just taking those four that were written out and just saving them as context into here. So that's the partnership. This will be Jonas. This will be Elias. And then this will be something about pirates. Twilight of the Buccaneers. Okay. So then if I went back to the Muse version of it, and I go into here and I look at perspectives, now these have that same copy paste thing. So you just have to know they're not reactive. So just make sure you do one, stay in one headspace. Uh, I prefer once I get down to the nitty gritty parts of it to then just kind of rely on the develop workspace, just because it's more definitive. And then once I have all these written out, if I wanted to, then I can just surface this narrative structure into a nice uh, understanding of all 4 through lines all at once. So if you were to compare the ChatGPT log line to this has a little bit more extra to it that you're probably not used to. In fact, um, every night Muse goes through and makes up its own story based on other story forms
Hmm.
and all kinds of different genres that you can use to like kick off, or you can copy the thing. It's fine. It's free. Monsters in the Potty was quite a big surprise to me. When three misfits kids accidentally unleash a horde of trash talking monsters from a cursed porta potty. I don't know. That's what it came up with, and that's the movie poster. Uh, and then a series of all kinds of different genres just to show, and then if you like, Homestead, you could start with it, and it will take that story form and set it up for you so you can build off of it, change the names, change the locations, do whatever it is that you want to kind of get an idea of how that builds off or how you can build up a story from it. So these are story starters that are off of the develop workspace. So just know that that's there for you. That's really fun. So then now if I go to Tides of Reckoning and I look at the objective story. So once you're in the objective story and you want to do this thing with the perspectives. So this was something that came up out of the development of some stuff that will be coming out here in the next month or so. But just the idea that you can track like handoffs, that's what this is for the perspective. So usually there's just one objective story. So when I set that perspective, now I'm in the Twilight of Buccaneers perspective. And all these story points, everything is related to that one objective story. So I'd want to go through, and when it comes to the transits from that big long list that Muse just did for me, I'd want to go ahead and illustrate those 4 transits and drop in their information here in the same way that I did for the 4 through lines. So I'll show you manually because it's actually probably a good way to see your way to work around it. But all I'm doing is going through and just saying, all right, I want to work on these 4 transits. So it's generating them all. And then if I go back to my conversation, should be able to grab those 16 transits. Let's do this. So here, this would be the first one. Where is it? That's interesting. Did it even have the right? What are you doing? Did I have the? Oh, haha! I thought it messed up. That's transit two. Sorry. Learning. Okay. So let's put learning in here. And once I'm in here, I usually do either the summarize. Let's go ahead and leave it off just for time wise. Let's do, here's number 2. So this would be the second act. Drop that in there. Then I will take the third act here. And then the fourth act. Have you tried seeing how news focus handles handoffs and the weaving of moments? How would you prompt it to make sure it understands what it should do? I don't have that hooked up, but I could see a way to make that go forward. It knows the different uh, perspectives. Let me do this first. All right, so now I have the 4 transits that are there, right? Of the objective story. And if I close all these up, so then those are the 4 that Muse had written. If I go here, I should have, oh, there it is. Okay, great. So then, I'm trying to get past the idea of the fact that it just did objective story, main character. It's not going to be that same pattern over and over again. So actually, let me come in here and set Elias, and I'll go into the story beats, and I'm just going to do the first act just to show how all this works. So let me set this first act, and this is when he supposedly is going to be remembering stuff. And remember, this is just off of ChatGPT. So he's introduced a battle-weary pirate whose memories of past glories still haunt him. He dreams of a peaceful life in Nassau, though memories of bloodshed linger. So this would be a case of like looking at memory and like, oh, he just remembers a bunch of stuff. This is like, wow, all right. Elias remembers a bunch of stuff, which is not like how this is supposed to work. This should be actively creating conflict. What I like to call like memorying. So like engaging in that method of memory is actually creating conflict. But you might not know that, and you might think, oh, this is really good. So what I've done, and I just updated this morning, is with the review, it should go through and take a look at this and not only go over whether or not it's good enough, but also how to improve it and to give suggestions for improving it. So it'll go through and do kind of an analysis of how well it fits in with the appreciation of the story beat, but then also how that applies to, in this case, memory, and give suggestions, delving deeper, which is its favorite phrase, into these recollections as tools of both insight and discord would further his arc. And then gives you a list of 3 different versions that you could do to actually make it more provocative, more engaging, and actually conflict that fits within the context of the story that you're working on. So Elias stumbles across an ancient token of a younger betrayal amidst a pile of loot, provoking a vivid cascade of forgotten grievances. Suddenly, emotions long buried rise to the surface. So, like a lot of repression is in that memory, leading to a reckless confrontation with Jonas Crow. So it's not just that he just remembers, it's the fact that it creates conflict, and then he has some reckless confrontation with this guy. So that one would be really cool. I actually kind of like that. So then I might, and that's much more engaging to me than in quiet moments at sea, we glimpse flashbacks of his most notorious raids. That's not how memory is supposed to be. That's maybe good for backstory, but you want something that's active and a part of the actual problem. And so I can add that one. This one, he uncovers a fellow crewmate detailing the past against him in song, and before he calms down, words he thought on repressed surfaces, saying much mistaken amends. This is so funny. There is one option here that doesn't even write complete sentences, so I have to find out why that is. Suddenly recalls. That's funny. All right. Well, while trading barbs with a rival pirate lord, Elias suddenly recalls a fateful betrayal from his youth. The memory shakes his usual composure, leading him to reevaluate the deal before him while igniting suspicion among his crew as to his stability. That's really great. I have no idea why this one doesn't even make sense. Calms down words he thought on repressed surfaces, saying much mistaken amends. So I'll have to look to see why that's doing that. But anyways, so those review are on the story points and the story beats, and it knows all the different narrative structures. So make sure you take advantage of that, and I will find out why that's having issues there. But let's see. Okay, so it's almost time. So main character. Let me do the obstacle character one. Let me set this to Jonas. Go into story V1. And then I will do the relationship story. So I'll do this, do that. And then relationship is this one here. All right. Okay. So now if I go, so the section I wanted to talk about when it comes to like weaving and putting stuff into different places. If I come into Act 1 here, you'll see those 4 transits. So this we'll just do this one act. But these aren't really like what happens in the act. I mean, these aren't equivalent to scenes and these aren't equivalent to sequences. They're just what happens over the scope of the act. So what you want to do is you want to add a moment here, and these moments are equivalent to scenes, they're equivalent to chapters, they're equivalent to sequences, whatever it is that you want. And then so like let's say I did the focus first version of it where it just did the objective story, then it did the main character, then it did the obstacle character, and then it did the relationship story. So what's happened is I've added these in here. Just reload this a second. So I've attached them. Those moments are just like containers because chapters, scenes, and sequences really don't have any meaning when it comes to the narrative. They're just convenient places for you as the author to kind of keep track of things. So you'll see here, here's that first transit, here's that second one, and they're divided up into moments. I don't know what these moments are. If I wanted to, I could leave this order, or I can move these around and redo the order and ignore the way that, Muse originally had it. So this is the manual way of doing it. Um, and then within those moments, then what we have now is you can have a setup here. So for instance, if I was to let's take the main character one, which was all that cool stuff that he had going on, and I just do this. Haunted by glory, betrayal, bruised within. So that's kind of like what is going on in him. Um, the setup would be a place where you would want to set what the setting is. Like just the world, and if you knew the kind of scene that you would want. So let's say imagine this is a scene, and I'll just come up with something. What would be a good scene for Elias to deal with his betrayal issues on the beginning? Whoops. Just give me the setting description. I just want to show you how this works. So this says set the stage with location, characters, and key details. So it's basically just the storytelling. All right, so it's a dimly lit captain's quarters. All right, so I'm going to take this. I'm going to put this in here. Okay. Um, and I'm gonna put everything in there. So I'm gonna put this one in there, and I'm gonna put this one in here just to show you. Actually, let's go ahead and put all of them. Okay, so now all four of these are in here in this scene. So this is gonna be the greatest scene of all time in the first act, where it's gonna have every single. You usually don't do this in the very first act. But what you can do is this order here is totally completely up to you. So I can move these around, and because they're all contained within this act, they're not going to fall out of sequence. They're going to be great. But if I'm not sure what I have in here, and sometimes I might have so much in here, for instance, if I go to the main character, story beats, and I say I want to break these down, um, and I will have it generate this stuff. So what it's going to do now is it's going to look at that story of memory and of all this betrayal stuff that he's going through, and kind of beat out that story given the narrative structure of what's in there, and kind of tell the story of that first act. So it's defining what those beats actually are, adding them to the story, and then kind of looking at the context of it, and then looking at a bunch of extra added goodies that Subtext has to then kind of tell that story of how that main character would progress through these different issues. Anybody have any questions while we wait for these agents to finish? So you can just work on that outline just real quickly. There's that ChatGPT outline. The act is really basic, and now I'm just having it take that idea and kind of come up with the four scenes that are in it. All right, what was the question?
So let's say I want to write or I want to generate a B story that's same thematics, of the story form, but just different players, different contexts, or maybe focusing on one aspect of the elements or something like that.
Yeah, you would just go into four through lines, and if it's a different relationship story or objective story, if you wanted to explore the same thematics, right? Like
Yeah.
this picked a partnership between him and some other Anne, I think was her name. But maybe I do want to do the relationship between Elias and Jonas. Then I would just go ahead and add another relationship story through line perspective. And then this could be um, the relationship between Elias and Jonas,
And then
brothers.
I can go into Muse and ask it about that story.
Yeah, because it'll once it has this in here, brotherly rivalry. Now it knows that there are those two perspectives. And when it comes to the relationship story through line, I've got a partnership, which I guess is between him and Anne, and then a brotherly rivalry that I can track.
Okay, that's
The
great.
relationship story, you can choose which one you want to follow and develop. You can develop both at the same time. But what I wanted to show here is the main character back now? Did it not do it? Okay, yeah, so it took that original idea here of the stuff that he's going through, and then these are the thematic issues that Elias works through in that first act, and did its best to come up with scenes that fit those issues. You know, under the eerie blue glow of a full moon, Elias confronts Jonas Crow in a heated exchange fueled by suspicion and resurfacing betrayal, symbolized by the token. That was totally built off of that review AI that then built that thing that we could then spin off into this issue of qualification, which is, qualifying who you can trust and who you can't trust. But then if I go to the act one here, you'll see all of these different progressions are here, and I can add this to that scene. Now there's more beats in here for this to deal with. You know, this might go in the first scene, this one might go in the third scene, and this one might go in the fourth. You know, and even this progression can break down into the events. Maybe I want to break down those events. And that'll be very specifically how that specific scene starts, what it goes through, and how it ends. And this is all leading to show you the weaving part, which I'll show you in one sec. Any thoughts? John, anybody? I think I got everything. I got the penguin. I got dropping in your own story, the story starters, and the review AI stuff. And then this was the weave stuff that I wanted to do from last week. So let's get this in here. So the idea is like, so you can see how instantly this becomes really unmanageable when you have all these different progressions and all these different events. And it's like, it's too much. And that's usually why I say people give up when they hit this spot. But what is nice now is you can just hit this weave button and it will go ahead and weave all that stuff in for you. And even the moments that I just came up with moments, it's going to be able to look at what it is that you've written so far, design the moments, and then just weave it for you together. So
Is the weaving based upon any kind of logic?
no, like I used to have a thing, and it's actually still here. Well, technically it is logic because it'll logically pick the best beats that go in what order. I used to have a thing here where you know, this is my special version of logic, but it's very determinative. It's very much like, okay, the main character beat in the first act comes before the obstacle character, and there's just one way. This is like one way. If I hit this, it would go through and weave the entire story, but just in one way. These other ones are tongue in cheek.
Ah,
This is Hero's Journey. This is Save, or no, this is something, I forget which ones are which, but I used to have the names, but I can't have the names anymore. This is like Save the Cat. This is Story Circle. This is USC. You would just hit these in kind of like their kind of prescriptive ways. I went through and did it. So I will probably keep these, but what I found to be more exciting is that now I can just go into um, and using the new models that are more built for reasoning. Oh, let me drop all. So these are all the events that came up for that scene, which are the smallest ways of looking at a scene. So you'll see I have them all here, and you can move them around. If you move them out of order, it'll mark it red. But you can see how if you have different through lines, it becomes really super unmanageable. So what's great is now you can just go into weave and then just have it weave it for you. So now it'll look at all those story beats, look at the context that you have it set in, and then put them in the best order to varying degrees of success, only because I don't really have different through lines in here. So I wonder if this is even gonna play out and show like the right step, or if it's just gonna be the same exact step. But let me see. And this is not the right signature for it. It should take a bit. Let's see. I think this is it. Tides of Reckoning. Yeah, this is the one I do want to work on just to make sure it doesn't give preference, because right now it's confused and it thinks transits are more important than progressions and are more important than events. And really, theoretically, they're all the same importance, right? They don't, one isn't better than the other. Uh, and you should be able to, oh, it did it. Rad. Okay, cool. So these are slightly, oh, no, did it? No, it didn't. No, this is just the same thing. I wonder if it finished. Did it finish? No, it didn't finish. Might have come back too soon. Let's see. I don't expect it'll be different. Did it do this synopsis? It didn't even do that. All right. Well, the idea is that it should weave these together. It's obviously not working as expected. But let me, and then also generate a synopsis based on all these story beats that you can read through and see if like, oh, this is the story that I wanted. So this went through and actually wrote kind of like a treatment based on all those story beats. Yeah, this is cool. And then the breaking point, a weapon is drawn, it's clean, catching the moonlight. It's following the narrative structure that you created thematically from that little chat GPT outline thing. And then if you don't like this isn't editable currently. You can move the order of these. So this is how you would start to weave as you like weave in different through lines, the obstacle character through line, different perspectives for different relationships, right? Yeah, it can get crazy. And then you can just regenerate it and have it written out as a treatment that you can then just download and send off to whoever. Token, now slammed onto the deck by Elias in a fit of rage, becomes a symbol of shattered trust and crumbling of old certainties. That's absolutely driven from that memory thing that the review AI had come up with. So in short, we went from uh, is Elias even in Act 1? Oh yeah. We went from Captain Elias Graves, a once feared pirate, now wishes to retire from a life at sea, to this whole scene, which is a whole scene, devoted to what it is that he's dealing with, that will fit within the larger scale of a narrative structure. It's not really like it's not made up. It's like it's going to lead into the next progression, which then leads into the next one, and we'll work with the ones before it as well.
Hmm.
Cool. So this worked really cool. I still got to work on this part because again, I mean, this is only one scene, so technically this is right. It doesn't work as good for an example. There you should see different ones moving in order, different through lines. But for the first act in your first scene, this is pretty accurate. You'd want to do like 5, 6, 7, 8. This is all the stuff that he's dealing with internally. And that'll do it for this giant round of demo day. If anybody has any questions, going through Discord is a really great place for it. I can answer them there. You can email me, but you probably won't get back from me. If you run into any issues technically, that's what this life preserver is for. Get help, ring the bell, and then that way it's tied into everything so I can see what's actually going on, as opposed to it's not working and then I can't help. But if you do this, then that would be very, very, very helpful. Yeah, and I'll keep working on this, and hopefully every week I'll just do this to keep everybody up to date on the latest and greatest. Thank you, Brandon. That's super cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
And
Jim. And
uh,
you're gonna make this replay available. We can watch it. Okay.
yeah, totally. I know
Thank
it's a ton of information, but yeah,
you.
I was recording it and I'll put it up there and everybody can check it out.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. All right. See you, everybody. I'm gonna go take a break. And yeah, I'll just see you guys later. See ya. Oh my God, I'm still going end.